Well, I'm from Milford, and uh, I joined the customs in April the 30th, um, 19 what was it? 1973. So it's almost 50 years ago. So I had done my leaving cert, and I was working in Letterkenny in McGee's pharmacy, you know. So and so I was looking for jobs. In fact, my mother saw this ad in the paper about customs officers, you know. So um, applied for that and ended up uh, starting off in Dublin in as I say, 1973. So uh, my first posting was after a fortnight in Dublin, just as a kind of um, an induction uh, fortnight. I was sent to Carricarnan, which is between um, Newry and Dundalk. So it's probably the most easterly. Well, it is the most easterly of the customs posts. So I was there for just under a year. Then back to Dublin. We were trained properly then, and so I was sent to the airport in Dublin. I was there for a year or so, and then to the port in Dublin for a year or so, and then I had met my future wife by this stage. So um, and so I applied for a job up in, there were vacancies in Muff. So I applied for one of the posts there and got it. So I started there in on August 1976. 1976. So, and I was there then until the the borders were opened up in January 1993.
So you were in the same post then,
Yeah,
essentially from that
from
time right
76 until 93.
Okay.
Yeah,
Would that have been common to be in the one place?
It would. You would probably settle down as I did. I got married in 1978 and lived in Muff, and we had 4 children there, and so, but before I left, um, I began to do a part-time degree course in McGee, and I started that in 1987. So and by the time January 1993 came along, I was just finishing doing a second degree, or I did the degree in business studies, and then I went on to do an MBA then. So actually, myself and another fella, Muir McLaughlin, were the two really who did those courses, and then another fella joined us then, Michael O'Connor, and so it was very interesting, and it was good crack and a great distraction from working in the customs, and you felt you were doing something and some kind of preparation for what might be going to happen, you know. So and I got a voluntary early retirement um, in March 1993.
So that would have been just a few months after the border posts were removed.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Was it the Single European Act or the
Single European Act? That's right. So and it was forecast in advance, and our boss, actually, in fairness to a fellow called Pat McNally, who uh, he was saying, you should be doing something because you don't know what's going to happen really when the borders are opened up, and it was good advice, and apart from preparing for maybe a change of jobs, it was really interesting to do some further education, so it was brilliant, it was very enjoyable, so met a lot of different people, and had a whole lot of different experiences as well, so.
Were there colleagues of yours maybe that were redeployed within the service itself?
Oh, we were all redeployed, really. There had been sort of rumblings from Dublin. Oh, you're going to be out. You'll not be put out of a job, but you'll be given jobs in Dublin and Sligo, and some of us thought, my God, how are we going to manage that? But so it wasn't a great prospect, and you didn't know how long something was going to. I was in the VRT office, the Vehicle Registration Tax Office, and we thought, well, that'll only last for a wee while because the EU won't let, there won't be any need for VRT because you'll be able to go and buy your vehicle in the north or any other European country and bring it in without any problems, if you wanted to do that, But no, VRT is still lasting now, and it's
as busy as ever.
2023. That's right. Yeah.
There must have been a lot of worry around then in the early 90s amongst you and your co-workers around where you would end up, or if you would have a job at all.
There was. We formed, all of the grades, in the Customs and Excise. We were all concerned, and we formed a Donegal Action Committee, as we called it, and to try to get people in Dublin to understand that there were a lot of families that were going to be affected, and was there any work that could be decentralized to Donegal with such a, there was about 60 or so customs officers in Donegal, and and we succeeded in getting, the VRT and a few other things as well, decentralized to Bridgend and to Lifford and to Letterkenny. So there were sort of three bases really that were able to absorb a good lot of the staff, that were going to be made redundant, I suppose you could nearly call it,
Yeah. And so what was the day-to-day work like when you started off in the mid-70s, early 70s?
Well, we were all the uniformed staff. There was a uniformed staff and the non-uniformed who worked in road stations, and really were just taking the money, from the commercial end of the border, So there was a good lot of traffic across the border every day with commercial traffic of one kind, like oil and electrical goods and whatever it was, animals as well, going both ways across the border, So, and lots of opportunities for smuggling, I suppose, too, which was, it was good crack, really, in a way, but I suppose in a way it was sort of a young person's job. The uniform part of it was a young person's job, really, At least we sort of convinced ourselves of that, I know,
Aye. Would you have been tasked with standing at a post, but also going out and patrol as well? Then?
Yeah, in Muff now we had the frontier post, as it was called, and and the road station, which was in behind. But you only went to the road station, if you had customs papers done, But with us now, there were 6 assistant officers, which is my grade, and 2 officers, and they we sort of rotated, between the mobile patrol car and the frontier post. So the mobile patrol car was much more popular than the frontier post, because in the frontier post you were confined to quarters, I'll say, whereas in the patrol car you had much more freedom of where you were going to patrol and when you were going to patrol as well,
Was that down to you?
It was sort of. Sorry?
Did you have some autonomy?
You had a lot of autonomy. You did have a lot. Well, the officer who there were in a patrol car, there was an officer and 3 assistant officers. But a lot of the time it was maybe two assistant officers and an officer. And sometimes it was even, say, 3 assistant officers. You'd be on patrol and. But it was interesting, and it wasn't very hard work, really, I felt, the frontier post, was was because of the fact that you were sort of doing a more strict hours, opening and closing hours. You know, those were your hours of duty. You know, and so it was a bit more tedious, I suppose you would say. You know, and you were supposed to be out, you know, examining traffic on the road and stuff like that. You know, but with the way the European Union developed, and with the quite generous allowances, you know, by no means did you examine every single vehicle that went up and down the road. You know,
This was pre-92, 93. Then you mean whatever as the European Union developed?
yeah, that's right. There was one sort of period when Ray McSherry was the finance minister, and he managed to get this 48-hour rule implemented. But it was a very good thing for the economy in the Republic, because of the fact that, you know, the shops in the Republic were suffering badly because of the fact that people did a lot of their shopping in the north. Petrol was cheaper in the north, and the goods were cheaper as well, and there was more variety. And you had the situation at one stage where you had bus loads of people coming up out of Dublin and even below Dublin to Newry, for example, to shop. And the shops in the Republic of Ireland lost a lot, you know. And the shops or towns like Letterkenny and Moville, Carndonagh, Buncrana, you know, the towns that are near the border, you know, suffered a fair bit as well, you know. So the 48-hour rule meant that you had to be out of the country for 48 hours to avail of the generous allowances, you know, that you were allowed to take across the border, you know. So so it was, but then that sort of went by the way then, and again, you know, the more, well, obviously it was all one single European Act then, after 1993.
So that meant in effect that there was no need for a frontier post.
That's
anymore,
right.
And there was no infrastructure anymore. So
that's right. That's right.
That must have had a big impact. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that change, but you know, for a lot of people, there's no memory of any infrastructure on the border. You know, I know
right.
the military posts were still there, obviously, to the end of the 90s, but even having the customs gone.
Oh, it was made a big change, right enough. It was strange, really, you know. But I suppose when you think of it, like, you know, it was a very temporary arrangement, really, you know, from 1923 to 1993. It was 70 years. For 70 years, this appeared, and then it disappeared, you know, which was really strange. You know, when you think of it now in the context of Brexit and all that type of thing, you know, and the threat of, I suppose some people would call it a threat anyway, of customs posts reappearing on the border, you know.
It's been 30 years since they've come down.
It's hard to believe, really.
And you think about it in that context, it doesn't feel maybe like 30 years since they've been down.
No, it doesn't at all, you know, right enough, yeah.
It is almost like a blip.
It was sort of a blip, all right, yeah.
And I mentioned there the military checkpoints that were on the border.
Yeah.
You know, it was probably a dangerous time to be working on the border too, in some ways, was it?
We never really felt to be in danger at all, you know. There was one very bad incident now that happened, you know, when our patrol car was out on patrol, and it was just before Easter in, when was that? Was it 79? Must have been 79. I think it was. They were on patrol over by between Bridgend and Calais or Kildrum, you know, and so there was a van that appeared, you know, on one of the back roads, and the normal thing that the patrol car did then was just to flag it down and see what the story was. You know, were they carrying any contraband or whatever, like, you know. But so they stopped. You know, I wasn't there that night. You know, but one of the boys went, you know, got out of the car and went walking down to chat to the whoever was in the van. But the next thing, they started shooting. Somebody started shooting, and you know, there was no warning or anything like that. If there had been a warning, the fellow that was walking towards them would have backed off, because we didn't have any role as far as security or anything like that was concerned. You know, we didn't want to have either. You know, and but they apparently were two young fellas, and they opened up anyway, and my colleague was shot in the leg, and he was lying on the road for a good while, because the patrol car then, they heard the shots and they took off, and they met a Garda patrol car not too far away, and but by the time the Garda patrol car got there, I think a neighbour, you know, somebody had heard the shots and they had run to rescue him, and began to take, you know, they were going to take him to Letterkenny Hospital, but he said, no, take me to Altnagalvan. And they went through the army checkpoint then at Calais, and they put a tourniquet on his leg and gave him an escort to Altnagalvan. And he did lose his leg, you know, so he lost his leg. So it was totally out of the blue. That's the only incident I ever remember happening in the border on that time, you know.
That's interesting that, you know, when you think about it in the context of the times, you might look back and think it must have been a very dangerous place. But you know,
no, there was no sense of danger at all, really. You know, and a lot of the time you would have been on your own there in the frontier post. You know, late enough at night, you know, and you never felt you were in any danger at all, you know. Some of the northern frontier posts were attacked, and it meant that then they withdrew into the town or the city, you know.
Right, that's what I was going to ask you. Did you have much interaction with them?
Well, I came to Muff in 1976, August 1976, and the frontier post on the Culmore side had already been withdrawn into the city, you know. So there was no interaction. There had been interaction before between the customs officers on both sides of the border, you know, and they would have known each other's names and all that type of thing, you know. But whenever I came there now, there was no interaction at all, because they were gone from the border, you know.
So what way did they work then? Did they go indoors? Like, where was the post then on the northern side? Would it have been Culmore?
It would have been just around the corner from the customs post in Muff. Yeah.
And so was there a building there that they went into first, or did they go back into Derry then eventually?
They just went back into Derry. There was what did they call it? I can't even remember the name of it now. In Derry, you know, but it was in near the docks in Derry, you know. So.
Does that mean there was no checks or anything then on the northern side?
Well, there were patrol cars, all right. You know, they had a patrol car as well, or patrol cars, and but you know, my knowledge of all that, you know, was very scanty, because you know, there was, as I say, there was no interaction between the customs officers on each side of the border, you know. So I wouldn't have known any of them at all, really, you know. I got to know a couple of the men, you know, later on, you know, but even not necessarily in the context of customs at all, like, you know. So.
Was it an enjoyable job then when you were doing it?
It was enjoyable. It was enjoyable. It wasn't very wasn't particularly taxing, I felt, um, and you know, um, and there was good sort of relationships between all of the customs fellas on each of the different posts along the border, on the Republic side, So
How did you get on with the local people? Was it a fairly good relationship?
very
Was there
good.
any
Very,
antagonism between?
not really at all. No, not really. It would have been a very rare occurrence for anybody to you know to have voiced any feelings about the customs men, at all, and we got on well. We lived in the village, myself, and there were actually three of us from the Fannet Peninsula working in Muff. Hugh McDade, uh, and his father and my father both worked in Milford Bakery and Flour Mills. John McAteer from Donegal in Fannet, and myself, I'm from Milford. And so we all ended up in Muff. And then there were three younger fellas then, Muir McLaughlin from Fawn, Barney McClure from Carndonagh, and David Flynn, who is from Dublin and has since settled in Muff and still lives in Muff, So, can't remember what question you asked me now.
No, that was it. It was just about
Oh, I was on. Was there much?
people?
The local people, we got on really well with the local people, to be honest.
I suppose you were all living locally too.
We were all living locally, and yeah, and we would have partaken of alcohol and stuff like that in the various pubs. so no, it was good relationship, really. Would have maybe played a bit of football with some of the local teams and things like that. They had a good football team in Culmore and Quigley's Point, So and a lot of the customs fellas, would have played football, especially Gaelic football and hurling. In different parts of Donegal, So I don't know, everybody, we got on well, really. So I suppose it had been well established by that stage. The customs post, and it just became what you did. You stopped at the border, and fair enough. I'm sure there was plenty of smuggling. I remember, we used to shop in Derry for not very odd occasion. Say for confirmation clothes or things like that, or first communion and things like that, and you whatever clothes you bought, you were covered over with other clothes, So I'm sure there are plenty of good stories about different bits and pieces of smuggling,